Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you're based. My name is Claudia and I'm with the Marcus Evans Group. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar on harnessing the power of data analytics to boost your marketing strategy, brought to you in partnership with Underscore. Before I begin, I would like to walk you through a few housekeeping items. As you can see in the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can see. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so please make sure that you move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. If you have any questions during today's webinar, we encourage you to submit it via the Q&A widget. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, but if a full answer is needed or we just run out of time, do not worry at all. Someone from the Underscore team will get back in touch via email or perhaps a telephone call after today's event. Copies of today's slide deck and additional help materials are also available on the resource list. Go ahead, download any white paper resources that you may find useful, and feel free to share it with your team. We also have a help widget in case that you are facing any difficulties. Just to let you know, this event is being recorded and you will have access to the event 2 hours after. With that said, I would like now to hand it over to John, who is going to be moderating the sessions, and then I'll be catching up later on after the Q&A. Thank you so much and enjoy it.
Thank you, Claudia. And hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. On behalf of our panel, Kristin, Neal, and Chris, our partner, Marcus Evans, and our sponsor organization, Underscore Marketing, I'd like to welcome you to today's discussion. My name is John Marino, and I'm the VP of Strategy here at Underscore Marketing, and I'll be the moderator. I'm located in lovely Saratoga Springs, New York, which is home of Saratoga Springs mineral water. You might have seen that in and around airports you've traveled to, and also home of the oldest thoroughbred racetrack in the United States. As we emerge from the pandemic, we enter into a very different world in the pharma industry. Field teams are smaller, find it more difficult to meet with physicians. Events are smaller and/or virtual, and marketing budgets are more constrained. A new approach must be taken in order to reach your target audience and build brand awareness and performance. This new approach has created a higher demand to use and share data from multiple sources across your organization to meet your overall business objectives. Our objective here today is to share best practices on how to use the right data, not just any data, to make better decisions for your brand. As we start this discussion, please think of your own challenges with sifting through the large amounts of data you are receiving to make informed decisions. Think about how are you connecting data from multiple sources? How are you utilizing data to target and segment your audience? And how are you refining those audiences? This transition into a more virtual world has forced pharma marketers to become more creative, increase media tactics, rely on a variety of data sources to make your informed decisions. And personally, this really excites me because it has allowed the pharma industry to catch up with other industries from a data and technology perspective. Today's agenda will consist of an introduction to the panelists and meeting the experts, overall industry's trends and challenges when it comes to data and analytics, who we are as an organization. The meat of the program will consist of the panel discussion, and finally, the Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kristin Squires to start the introductions.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I echo John's excitement for this program. Really looking forward to the discussion. As John mentioned, my name is Kristin Squires. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Harmony Biosciences, which is a commercial stage pharmaceutical company based in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. And we are focused right now in central nervous system disorders and rare disease.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neal Wolff. Nice to be with you today and look forward to an engaging discussion with my fellow panelists. I currently am the Vice President of Marketing at Vyluma. We're a division of Nevicar, and I've been very fortunate in my career to work at great companies like Bristol Myers Squibb, AbbVie, Sanofi, and Medicines Company in various commercial roles. And looking forward to speaking with you and having an engaging conversation on digital marketing today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Tuleya. I'm the Managing Director at Underscore. I'm a self-proclaimed data geek. I've been in media for over 20 years. To give a little background, my parents were an engineer and a math teacher. However, I took a little bit of a rebellious path and went the lovely route of communication and found my way back to media, though. And I think what really brought me back was what we're talking about, data, numbers. And it's really just something that has come sort of naturally to me, and also is very, I find it very exciting. So I'm excited to talk about it. As I was just having a conversation today or yesterday with my son Jake about math, I was explaining how math is logical, but 2 + 2 is always 4. But what that 4 means is really what is exciting. So what I'm looking forward to is just having a good discussion about data and how we use it and interpret it, and excited to be here.
Thank you, Kristin, Neal, and Chris. As we jump into the industry trends and challenges as they relate to data, there really has been a paradigm shift. This new post-pandemic world that we're living in really required an adaptation and engaging into what data looks like and how you are utilizing data within your brands. What is the right data? There's so much data coming at you from all angles, your brand teams, your marketing tactics, your field teams, and just sifting through all of that data to determine what is the right data in order to make those informed decisions is a challenge. And then connecting the dots with your omni-channel campaigns. So really taking all of that data from different areas of your organization in your different campaigns, putting them together to really make that decision on what is working and what isn't. The focus on patient centricity, building that personalized building those personalized patient campaigns is increasingly challenging, especially with the increase in data privacy that is happening throughout the different iOS updates, as well as with global data privacy. And then finally, filling the void. That third-party data that is happening, as well as sunsetting some of that data, really focusing on that physician-level data and NPI data that you can pull through in order to see where those marketing efforts are really being successful. And a little about who Underscore is as an organization. We were founded in 2002, and we are a 100% media-focused agency. Our headquarters are located in New York City, and we have a team that is located throughout the US, as well as an office in the EU. Data is at our soul and is at our core. We utilize data to plan, execute, and analyze media activities that really focus on meeting your brand objectives. And we do this through a full service of media services that range from omni-channel media programs all the way through the data and analytics and measurement side. And data is in our DNA. As Chris had mentioned, he is a self-proclaimed data geek. He is not the only one that is here, that is a data geek here at Underscore. We analyze all aspects of your omni-channel campaigns. We utilize data from the planning process all the way through the measurement process in order to make sure that we are pulling together the right data and providing you with the information in order for you to be successful with your overall brand objectives. And with that, we'll jump into the questions with the panel. So Neal, we'll start with you here. First and foremost, there's a lot of data that we are leveraging to make business decisions. Can you give us an idea of how you are defining data as it relates to meeting your overall strategic brand imperatives?
Yeah, that's a big one. So for simplicity's sake, let's think about data at the prescriber level and at the patient level. So at the prescriber level, really helping us think about how we segment our customers. Are they someone who's going to be an early adopter of a new therapy, or are they going to lag behind others? Are we looking at them, by deciling in terms of volumes of prescribing or patient volumes? So at the prescriber level, we want to really think about data and the users of our product, the potential users of our product. And so I think about it that way. And then I think about at the patient level and really drilling deep in understanding the different personas of the patients that we're targeting and understanding how they will react to different ways of presenting our product to them, different social channels and platforms, and how they like to communicate with each other, how they talk to each other and engage each other, and how they understand the disease. We use things like patient journeys to really understand how a patient travels through a disease and how a physician is treating and diagnosing that disease. So the simplest way of looking at it is looking at it from a prescriber and a patient level.
Yeah, great comments, Neal. I agree. It's a big question, right? That could be an hour-long discussion of how we define data just in and of itself. And I think for me, coming from different therapeutic areas and working on different brands, in particular, lots of launch brands, I really look at data as a way of almost like a triangle, for lack of a better word, and thinking about that triangle of market insights, and then on my promotional mix data that I have. And, I look at it as a triangle because they're all equally important, right? As you think about from a market perspective, what's the size of the therapeutic area that your brand is competing in? What are the diagnosis data? What are those trends? What's NRX and TRX is looking like? What's the competitive set looking like? What are as Neal was talking about, HCPs and the data around the HCPs and their adoption rates, and patients, how many patients are diagnosed, how many patients are undiagnosed, what's the potential here? Really looking at, what's their treatment journey? Again, what treatments have they been on before they get on your brand? That second part of the triangle for me is the market insights, and that, I look at that as data as well, that these are insights, data, information to help us as leading brands to make decisions. And what are we hearing directly from our customers in primary market research, or maybe even social listening? And that final part of the triangle for me is what I kind of call my promotional mix insights. The activities that I have happening in market for our brand. What is that telling me? What is the data, the metrics? How is my audience consuming media? What's resonating with my audience? And an important part of that promotional mix is obviously personal promotion. So what's the field telling us, right? In terms of, at the local level, what is happening with prescribers and patients, and what are some of those local trends? So really it's all those things coming together, and what I kind of lay on top of the triangle is why. John, you talked about all the data coming at us, and it is a lot, which is great, and we're very fortunate for that. But really, it's the understanding of that next level, like, what is this data telling us? Why is this happening? Can we replicate it? What's going on? So it's not just numbers and percentages and what's up and what's down, but it's really looking at the why behind the data.
Yeah, I think, Kristin, you hit on something that was really important coming from the media side. As a media person, we're tied to things like click-through rates and impressions and clicks, and I always call that's media data, and to a degree, that's a metric to evaluate, but it's the why. Why did something go up? Why did it go down? Why am I even doing it? Why am I sending an email? Why am I running on social? Why am I putting a video out there? I think a lot of times we get pigeonholed in the media when media starts getting talked about into those types of metrics. And one of the things that I've been trying to do for years and is really try and push out of that and say, some of those media metrics are a given. Like, we know we're doing email because it resonates with our audience. We might negotiate open rates, we might negotiate impressions, but those are media metrics. That's not necessarily driving the brand forward just by saying our click-through rate was higher. I worked in search for years, and click-through rates against physicians is actually a bad thing to be high, because there's just not that many physicians always searching. So one of the indicators could be that if something seems too high against an audience size, we've worked in rare disease, and so same thing. If you start seeing impressions that far exceed a customer base or a patient size, now you have to start questioning it. So I completely agree, and I think when I think about data, it's really that the stuff that drives your brand. And from our side, it's what can we help inform those decisions as well, beyond just those media metrics that, like I said, are sort of the given with the program that we negotiate. So it's really, what's that next level? And I think that's where we have to take it to really have a better understanding of performance.
One of the things that was on the prior slide of when you're describing underscore is, and it's something that I try to teach my team about, is we get say, and the secret sauce of what we really need to do in marketing and market research and data analytics is taking that data and turning it into information, and then ultimately driving to insights. Because insights is what we make strategic decisions around. It's what we build brand strategy around. And so the secret sauce is, how do you take data and get to insights? And that insights really informs everything we do. And then how do we measure how we're doing to drive to that insight and to build a tactic or a strategy around?
Yeah, I think, Neal, it goes back to what I was... Sorry, John.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, it goes back to what I was actually trying to describe to my son, which is 2 + 2 will always equal 4, but I have no idea if 4 is good or not. And that's that interpretation.
Yeah, and I really appreciate those answers that you all gave. There is so much data coming at us on a daily basis. And as Chris mentioned, media is one portion of that. But how does that really drive to those overall insights? And how does it bubble up, as Kristin mentioned, to that triangle that she works within to really make those informed decisions? And I think pulling all that data together is a challenge, and it's a good challenge to have, and really finding those strategic opportunities to really pull those insights together. Chris, I'm going to stick with you here to transition to audience targeting. And this is a topic that has really increased. We've always targeted for a number of years, but now with the amount of data that's coming in, we can, in the increase in digital tactics, there is just way more attention than there ever has been on audience targeting. And can you talk a little bit about some of the insights and share some of the insights you have into how you go about segmenting your audience to ensure you're reaching the right people?
Yeah, absolutely. So Neal hit on something when he was talking about prescribers and really talking about segmentation. I have to say, I love physicians. I love physicians in the media world because they've got this little identifier that tells me exactly who they are. So when Neal and Kristin are looking at different segmentations in the media world, we can actually isolate them and target based on those segmentations. We can also then report back on that. And one of the things that we've seen a huge shift in the last 5 years is towards that audience and towards that physician audience. And I think one of the values is that we can do that segmentation. We can actually help inform Salesforce. They, when they could, or pre-pandemic, before they walked into a doctor's office, they could know exactly what messages that doctor has engaged in. Because from a media perspective, there's all that data out there. From internal CRM data, we have that data. And by putting it all together, I think it really gives a much bigger picture. And then it also opens up some insights that we may not even be aware of at launch. And one of that, and I know we might talk about a little bit later, is the pandemic caused a whole level of no-see HCPs, physicians that don't want to get called on. And the channels at which we can reach them really primarily focus on media or email or internal lists that we can take advantage of. And I think that's a huge piece, because these are physicians that they're really hard to reach. They're really hard to have a conversation. And just one other piece on that, I also love HCPs for flipping it and saying, how do I find my patient base based on these HCPs? So if you have physicians that are key to the brand, well, what does that tell us about the patient audience? And how do I look at the inverse of that, which is, again, why I love numbers. It's not just the number you're showing, it's actually the opposite of it. So I give an example of, if we have a 5% engagement, it means 95% of people didn't. So what if we focus on the 95 and say, how do I engage those people? And that's something we're doing a lot of, especially on the HCP side, is trying to figure out against let's say we have a target list that we're going after, how many have I reached? How do I get as close to 100% as possible? It might be a matter of splitting different channels, looking at different options, working with our client base to say, hey, media may not be able to reach them. Let's look at a different approach. Let's take that investment elsewhere. So from a targeting perspective, like I said, I love having physicians involved in the mix just because of what it provides us.
Thanks, Chris. And Neal, do you want to share anything about how you guys are using insights and segment to segment your target audience?
Sure, but first I'll tell you, segmenting an audience or your prescriber base is the hardest thing you can do. And when you start doing it, you've got to really think about how they behave similarly. And data is useful for that, but you really have to spend a lot of time getting to know the customer. You got to live with them. You got to really understand how are they seeing patients. And I can tell you, I probably spend more effort around the segmentation, and really then once I've identified a segment, then validating if I got it right and if the team got it right. And that's so important, because then if you got your segmentation right, then the targeting is straightforward, an exercise of kind of saying, all right, who sits in that segment? And then why is that important? Because the people in your segmentation, that you segmented, they're going to react to your strategy, your tactics, your messaging one way. And what I find is that you need to message to them. You need to speak to them differently. They may find their data. They may be on different social platforms. They have different networks that influence them. So it's really important to get the segmentation right. And I always tell people, really spend more time up front getting that right, testing that, validating that, and then moving into targeting. And I would say that, as Chris said, in the last 5 years, what's really behaved differently is really teasing out how to deliver the right content to that segment to create the behavioral change we're looking for. So that's really been and then you mentioned briefly the no-see physicians. That just is an added complexity, because I think that's consistent across all segments, right? And there's always going to be these no-see physicians. So that just becomes additional challenges for everybody we're trying to call on. And we'll talk about that probably in a future question. But I would say from a targeting and segmentation, disproportionately invest your time and energy up front to get the segmentation right. Test that before you move into targeting.
Yeah, that's so important, right? And that segmentation is hard because it has a lot to do with attitudes and behaviors, right? So it's not just, in HCP's historical prescribing or uptake of, previous, products in a category or previous launches, but it's the actual attitude and behaviors that drive those prescribing decisions. And how do you extrapolate that to, broader audiences? Because it's, it is very, very challenging and very difficult. I think too, it also takes a lot of time. And I know sometimes, we're moving so quickly and markets are shifting so quickly that we don't have the luxury, many times of a year-long, 18-month segmentation process, because the data and the resources in the market that we're segmenting on and the behaviors and attitudes we were, thinking about changed because there was a new market event or something happened from a competitive landscape. So it is something that we've all learned to do, very quickly and very effectively, but there's definitely an art and a science to it.
Yeah, and it is an iterative process. And I appreciate your point there, Neal, where you're talking about the validation, right? It is always, constantly moving, and validating that audience and continue to fine tune it is really important. And I know you wanted to add something else there, Neal.
Yeah, I could tell you, we're talking about data today, but what happens when you don't have data and, you're in a new therapeutic area that there's really no historical data to pull from. You can't see how other therapeutic areas are being prescribed in the current space. And as we move into a lot of rare diseases, that's an issue that we're going to deal with. We're basically talking about data, but what if you don't have data? And so you're going to need to really go out and create your own data. You're going to have to do things like an ATU study to really get a finger on the pulse of the audience and see if you can tease out some of those segmentation differences. And exactly what Kristin was saying, totally agree. It's this attitudinal perception. And so, one of the things that we're trying to do now is, if we don't have data, can we create the data ourselves by asking a series of questions? And based on the responses to those questions, then we can begin to segment somebody into a particular, bucket, if you will. And so that becomes something that the data's not out there. You might have to create your own data.
Yeah, I like that, Neal. If you don't have enough data or the right data, find the data that's going to work for you. And Kristin, turning back to you, you had talked a little bit about the prescribing behavior as utilizing that as a little bit of validation on the segmentation and targeting. Are there any other targeting strategies or tactics that you've found success with to validate your target audience?
Yeah, great question. Great question, John. And I think, we can look at it in like two different ways. If we first talk about HCPs, so Chris mentioned, again, one of my favorite things, that's the MPI number, right? So we have the ability to really validate the HCP targets in terms of, are our strategies and our tactics working and reaching those audiences. It's really important for us to, as we're thinking about reaching HCPs, is partnering with other partners that really have the ability to do things like target list matches, and where you're doing a program and investing your marketing dollars, you're getting that HCP level in return for at least an MPI level, to know who's engaging with your tactics and things like that. So that's definitely one way to really validate the audience you have, and making sure that your tactics are reaching them, and you're putting your resources in the right spot. I know a lot of times, target list matches will come back at very high percentages, but you really do have to spend some time digging into those to make sure that it is really there, so you're utilizing your resources appropriately. I think for patients, it is a little bit different, right? So I think the first thing there is really understanding your audience, and really making sure that you're putting your dollars and your tactics where the audience is the first way to validate the audience. If you're there and your brand is trying to grow the market, and you're looking for undiagnosed patients, where are those undiagnosed patients? Where are they, and how do you reach them there? If you're looking at a switch strategy, these are diagnosed patients and you want them to switch from one brand to another, where are those individuals? And I think, making sure reaching the right audiences is, definitely a challenge. One of the things that has really worked effectively, especially as you look at, our brand.coms, who are all these visitors? What's driving their page views? Who are they? You just have these sort of sessions and numbers and volumes and time on site. But things like a visitor verification survey could be something a brand could look to do. At first when I heard about these things, it's like, oh no, I don't want to impede in that patient experience with the brand and stop them in their path of finding something, and bounce rates are going to be impacted, or session rates and duration. But that's really not the case. Done eloquently with just a few questions, people are willing to answer a few questions about who they are, and that really gives you some more insight to help validate who's visiting your site. And then some of those media drivers, if they're coming over from said media driver to your, that call to action is going to your brand site, using some type of little verification survey to really understand who they are. You thought you targeted them effectively, they took you up on the call to action, but just one little added question or two to validate who they actually are has been really helpful.
Yeah, I think Kristin hit on something on the the website and the performance metrics. And so search was actually my first love in media. And it was great because I always looked at it as like, it was a mini focus group. These people had no idea that I knew exactly what terms they searched on, and I knew how they got to the website. However, and I knew what they did when they got to the website. However, the challenge became, who were they? And that was typically the question that came next. And that's a challenging thing. And so, yeah, those visitor verification surveys. The other thing that's come up a lot on search, because, and Neal, I know you guys do a lot of search, especially within organic, is the question of HCP versus patient. How do I know it's a physician? You can use those surveys. There's some partners we have that we work with that actually validate back to the MPI number. So there are some interesting things going on there. to help validate it. They're not always realistic, always on type tactics, but they're definitely validations. Especially, I've said for years, a website's a huge investment. We built it for a reason. Let's understand who we're getting there and how it's driving the brand, because any channel like search that is really effective at reaching hand raisers, we still need to measure. We still need to understand if they're the right hand raisers. I think on the HCP side, you couldn't have hit it better, said it better when it's like the match rates always come back super high. And it's this lovely media world of like unfulfilled promises sometimes. And you're like, oh my God, they're reaching 98% of our target list. And then you get in market and it's like, you hit one physician 8,453 times. And by getting that data, we can start to actually hold accountability there and say, yeah, that's great. You know, we had an 80% match, but so far we've only reached 20%. And of that 20%, these 10 have made up 50% of that. And what I love about that is it's accountable, but it also does inform some brand decisions too. So we also can pass that information over to the brand, because one of the things I will say about data is I'm always transparent with it. And there might be something there with that physician who's engaging in that brand. Maybe they become a brand ambassador. And that's where I try and look at, you know, tactics and strategies more than just that surface level. What's their immediate focus, but how can I drive those insights, which I think is something we've all been sort of hitting on. And, you know, it's really, how do you think differently? How do you flip that cube over and say, what if I just look at it from the other side? And, you know, before a rep walks in the office, they know that, you know, this might be someone that actually is an advocate for the brand. Maybe there's something to do there. Maybe there's a different conversation that can happen. So I think
bring up a good point, Chris. Yeah, I think too, like, it's not just the reach, but it's the effectiveness of that reach. And I think, you know, we talk about patient centricity that John opened with, like behind that one doctor that you were talking about in that campaign is a patient, or maybe two patients or three patients that could learn something about the disorder or the condition they're living with, or learn about a new treatment. So it's a really good reminder for us.
Yep. Yeah. And I think we historically have been siloed with a lot of that. And that's where data can bring it all together and inform a lot of decisions when we think about it that way.
All right, I'm gonna keep it with you here, Chris, and transition to a question I know you are all excited about. You know, as we emerge from the pandemic, we do find ourselves in a much touted new normal, and what that new normal is kind of evolving every day. But there's an increase in no-see and hard-to-see HCPs, and so how do you really seek creative ways to get your messaging in front of those challenging customers? And we'll start there with you, Chris. You know, how are you really focusing with your clients on getting that message across to that increase in no-see physicians?
Yeah, so I mean, as everyone, the pandemic was very interesting from the get-go. It actually, aside from the white beard, I swear I did not have gray hair prior to my kids being home for 2 years and having to all of a sudden do a stay-at-home parenting and teaching type thing. I actually really loved that budgets were starting to shift and questions were starting to be asked and conversations were starting to be had about these physicians, these hard to see and no call doctors, because everyone at that point was a no call. And, you know, we were hoping they would do virtual. You also have to remember, like, conferences stopped. So, you know, there wasn't even a place to have a conversation or to, you know, talk to them, and everyone was doing, you know, the online panels, and, you know, but they weren't as effective. And so what we saw was a huge shift in available dollars to say, if we can find an effective way to reach this audience, what do we do? And, you know, the immediate was, oh, let's put it behind media, right? Let's run, you know, MPI based campaigns. Let's beef it up. And I think one of the, you know, the immediate responses from my side, at least, was, well, how do we do it more effectively? What are the new channels out there? How are they engaging? And something we're starting to see a lot of traction on is thinking about physicians as consumers, whereas we used to hit them behind the closed wall gardens of Medscape and, you know, Doximities. Well, now it's becoming more accepted that they actually see a professional ad while they're on ESPN or while they're on Fox News or they're on CNN. And so I think it really became interesting to start to think about physicians as people, not just the number, which again, I do love that number, but really thinking about, you know, who are they individually and what's that message we want to put in front of them and what's the right channel. recently we did something in the dermatology space where we actually went to market with a survey first to understand dermatologists' interest. They were super heavy in print. Not necessarily what we wanted to hear, but dermatology is much more of a visual field. And so it was interesting to get the feedback that, print was an important channel for them. So where we were immediately thinking, oh, digital, the feedback came back that print is still really important. So it actually helped that mix, because I think the immediate reaction was put everything in digital. Everyone's online, everyone's on their computer. I'll be honest, during the pandemic, I subscribed to 4 different magazines because I was like, I'm so sick of my phone and my computer that I want to sit down with a magazine. Now I've tried to do the whole pinch thing sometimes, which isn't as effective in a print piece, but I wasn't surprised to get that feedback. And I think that's where we're starting to see things level out is, there's become this new normal of an interesting mix that actually might be here for a long time versus us telling them, hey, everything's digital, where, it's really not done that way.
I have a surprise for everybody. Guess what? We've had no-see doctors for a long time. I started by carrying a bag, and I had no-see doctors. They've been around, and yeah, there's probably a few more, but we've got a lot of tools and resources, and so you have to think about it as being a surround sound. The rep is going to always be there, whether they do it in person or e-detailing, doesn't matter. There's still going to be messages to develop, and getting those in front of the doctor, HCP. However, we have to also get creative and know that their time is more limited, and they have other ways of getting new information. And so but we have to listen to our customers. We can't guess what their other ways are. We have to really listen to them and say, hey, how are you getting new information out? I think CME will never go away. We might deliver it less in person and more, virtual and on demand. That's fine. It's flexing that way. And I don't consider CME promotional. I just want to be clear about that. It's just another way of educating. But, I think that things that are like live events on Facebook and Instagram, tutorials, there's other ways that we can use social media to get messages in front. But I still think there's always going to be hard to see physicians, and we have to listen to see how do they like to consume this new information and try to put it in front of them, probably in shorter bites, smaller bite-sized portions like these tutorials. But I just think that we have to always be looking at new trends, but let's not forget there's always been and there will always be no-see physicians.
And I think too, for me, obviously the pandemic, it has impacted all of us, right? Not only, healthcare professionals and patients, but as a global society, right? And I think it's really taught us to do things in new ways, and what can we do differently? And it was okay, right? And how do you embrace those changes? I think, hopefully we're emerging from the pandemic, and, we may not go back to the way things are. As, Neal said, there's always going to be no-see. And so the whole world of virtual engagements with HCPs, I'm sure if, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we would have been like, oh no, that's never going to work. And I actually just read something from IQVIA. They put out an FAQ where they were, doing some surveys, and found out the average, virtual engagement between a rep and an HCP is like over 11 minutes. I mean, think about how much quality engagement that is, and even more, the impact of that call is not impacted virtually when they're using platforms to be able to show material. So we have to embrace that. If we do now have healthcare professionals that their office practices are changing, and being able to see, 20, 30 reps a day, may not be an option for them, but how do we come together and meet our customers where they are, and embrace all these new opportunities? That maybe some of the good things that are coming out of the pandemic.
I mean, think about it this way: put yourself in an HCP mindset. You are seeing patients differently today. You are telehealth and telemedicine is growing very rapidly, and I think everybody's figured it out last year, and now we're coming up to what's kind of our baseline going to be, and it might be 20% of a practice is telemedicine, one day or a couple hours a day, or one day a week. I'm seeing patients online. So we know that technology works. And as Kristin said, reps can do it. So maybe they're in person a few days a week and then behind a computer a few days a week. but I do think that live interaction is received well. It's a great use of time. It's very efficient. And it still requires really solid brand messaging, really strong visuals, done in like an e-detail format with good information discussed and shared. So I think everything else has to support that. I think that's always going to be the primary way of educating, and then everything else is supporting that primary educational approach with HCPs.
Yeah, and I think what we have on C, that word drastic, scares me, because I think everyone always looks for the magic bullet to a degree. And I hate to use the word drastic. I don't want, there should always have been a focus there, because that's logical. But there's not going to be the answer just sitting in front of you. That's where we talk about data and analysis. It's what do we do with that data to make sense of it? But it's not going to sit there telling you how to run your business in the, at the surface level. It's all the stuff we talked about. What's the messaging? What's the right channel? Time of day. We're doing a lot of analysis when you break down when they're engaging online, and shocker, physicians engage middle of the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's a huge part, whether they're on their lunch break or, but what can we do with that information is the important piece, and how do the brands take it and help drive their business forward.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, Chris, you and Neal made some great points. It's really, about getting your messaging in front of these physicians, right? There's always going to be those no-see physicians. There always has been. It's what creative ways can you get that messaging in front of the physician in order for them to really take action? And so, thank you for sharing your thoughts on what we could expect as we move forward in this new normal. And then, Kristin, transitioning here to that next best action. That's been a buzzword that has been happening for the past couple of years, and really it's always been a thing. It's now identified as that buzzword, and really moving your HCPs through your product story. And so, what challenges do you face as you are moving those HCPs through the marketing funnel to make sure that the content is meeting them where they are in the product story?
Yeah, no, it is such an important challenge for us, right? So as I look at this, sort of like the promise of next best action, and being able to pull together all of the data that we have on an HCP, and seeing where he or she is in their journey with the brand, from whether it's brand awareness to trial to adoption or even loyalty in that case. How awesome would that be, right? Take all the data that we have and put it in a little widget or something, right? And then it would just be able to tell all of us. We go in and say, all right, I'm going on a call with Dr. John, and it pops up on the rep's detail aid. This is my next best action. This message, inviting to this program, or even from a non-personal perspective, this is how this HCP has interacted with your brand, and the next best action is this, rep triggered email, or this non-personal direct mail, or et cetera. So it's challenging because it is so big, right? And I don't think we've sort of unlocked, Chris talked about the silver bullet, right? I don't think we've unlocked the code to simplify. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with this, is it is not simple. HCPs in their brand journey are fluid. They can always be changing, right? They may stay in brand awareness for a really, really long time, or they may go right from brand awareness one day all the way to loyalty, because they understand the market and they've been waiting for, said treatment option. So it's really, how do we make it impactful and actionable, and keep it simple? Again, how do we make sure that the business rules behind some of these insights don't take so long to develop and put in place that the market changes on us and they're no longer relevant? And I think the other thing here, from a challenging perspective, is the importance of our promotional mix we've been talking about, is that personal promotion, is that buy-in from the sales force on this. They're the ones with the first line relationship and insights on said customer, and being able to use the data to be able to provide this suggested next best action to the sales force in a way that fits in with their workflow, fits into their business. And they, again, going back to one of our earlier points, they understand the why behind it. Why is marketing, home office telling me this information, or where are they coming up with this recommendation? So getting the buy-in organizationally is really key, in particular with your sales leadership and your sales force is really critical.
Yeah, I think something you hit on data. One of the challenges we face on media, and again, obviously that's the perspective I'm coming from, is the lag still with some of these partners. There are some big partners where we're spending a lot of money who give us data 45 days after it runs, and then you could have programmatic data that's real time. So you're getting this lag that, to your point, Kristin, is the data is there. It's also, how do I make it actionable, and in a way that during those 45 days they could have had 3 conversations with the physician and completely missed the fact that that physician had engaged in 4 different types of messages, and we could have been on that next best action. I think that's one of the challenges we're facing and trying to push through. And sometimes it comes down to when we're having those initial conversations, and again, our approach is very transparent. It's not just us having that conversation, it's bringing the brand teams in to tell them why this is important and push on them to get that data quicker. And it's not a matter of measuring the media performance. It's a matter of getting exactly what we have here in the hands of the right people to make a decision, because 45 days is just too long of a lag time to say I can make an action. And yes, I know it's probably better than it was 5 years ago, but at this point, there's conversations that can happen with the click of a Zoom button. To Neal's point, I've never been on that side, but driving around from doctor to doctor was a very time-consuming ask. Now it's you could set it up right from your computer if you're doing it virtually, and so having that data at your fingertips, I think, is a really important thing. And unfortunately, there's still too many walls that we have to battle with, and that's where, again, bringing brand teams in and having these discussions with the Medscapes of the world is important from our perspective, because they want to see where that demand's coming from, because that's where that investment's coming from, the brand teams. So we should have that a little bit quicker, in my opinion.
So true. And those are the tactics that are, also have, not Medscape, but just have a pretty substantial price tag. So you're making an investment and you're not able to change it in for like another 45, 60 days or things like that. So it is really difficult decisions because they're big investments. And even organizationally, thinking about our promotional review process of these type of programs, they do take a lot of time to organizationally rally around and make them effective. So getting that data a lot quicker and sort of more real time is definitely an opportunity for the whole industry.
Yep.
Yeah, and Kristin and Chris, you really painted this picture of what the possibilities are, right? So the ability to get this data real time and then share it with your sales reps and really get their buy-in so that everything is fluid and moving quickly. But unfortunately, some of this data is just so delayed that a month later it can be outdated. So hopefully we see those improvements with some of the partners that we work with over time. And then speaking of the data and what we are able to get and see, the future of the cookie is really uncertain. And last week I received probably 5 or 6 requests from my iOS on my iPhone to make the new update to iOS 15. And I think after the 6th one, I really decided to do it. But these new updates are starting to get in line with global data privacy, and they're limiting the data that we as marketers can view through email opens, what we're able to see from website interaction and traffic, and how we really can follow that user and retarget them along the way. So are there other data sources that you see emerging that could really offer some opportunities? And we'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, the cookie conversation is a really tough one. I think a lot of times because it's out of our hands and out of our control. But I think first party data is something everyone talks about, owning your own data and getting as much first party as you can to make those insights is going to be, I think it's a huge thing and not easy to solve, but obviously that's where the world's going. I also think it might go back to marketing 101 to a degree in channels like social, where we understand the behavior, we understand the conversations that are happening, their interests, and insert ourselves into the conversation, not necessarily talk at through these channels, is going to be an important piece. Now, obviously in the pharma world, it's been a little behind some of the other world, but it's getting there. And I'd say much quicker than a lot of other channels that pharma may have been a little bit behind on adopting. It's, social is really starting to grow. And I think that's going to be a really important piece here on, as a lot of these updates are made. Again, the other part that's challenging from a media perspective is our hands are so tied. And it's, since we don't have control over it, there's so much wait and see and then react that it can be frustrating at times, and it can be hard to plan out something 6 months down the road, a year down the road. And I know the brand teams, that's one of the biggest challenges too, is if I plan something 12 months down the road, can I even implement on it? So it's the cookie one's a tough one.
Yeah, this scares me more than anything else. That's kind of coming down the pike, if you will. So two things. One, you really have to push for your old-fashioned email opt-in. So collect that, get their permission to have their email, and so that you could push content out to them and push things out to them. So really, really focus on that. But the second thing is something I recently became aware of. There are these new data sources that they do something called identity resolution, which is a data management process that they vet people's identity between data sets and match their offline persona using ethically sourced PII data, and think about things like mobile IDs and cookies. And as long as they follow all data privacy laws, this is actually a way that you can, find people and connect back to and get around these new data privacy changes that are being put into place. So it's something that I'm taking a very close look at and seeing if we can if this is an effective way. There's some claims that are being made by some of these companies that they have a very large amount of patients, or people identified. I shouldn't say patients, people identified. And if you can connect back, because of all the opt-ins, because how many times you download an app and you sign another opt-in and they collect all your data, boom, that's a way, it's not a workaround, but these companies have claimed that they've got workarounds.
Yeah, I've always said where there's money, there's a way, especially in the media world. And cookies are definitely a hit at some wallets that I think are going to cause some creative solutions potentially, hopefully above board solutions, but yeah, some creative solutions nonetheless.
All right, thank you, Chris and Neal, for that insight. It's certainly going to be challenging moving forward, and this is going to be something that's going to be constantly changing over the next couple of years. And so, Kristin, turning to you here, what challenges are you facing as you're building out an omnichannel media strategy? And how are you pulling in the data to really support the individual channels within that holistic strategy?
Yeah, that's a really great another important question, John. It could be an hour-long discussion in and of itself. So you're getting some really good important topics for all of us to think about and challenge ourselves to think about things in a different way, and really thinking about from a media perspective, right time, right place, right channel, and how do you strike that right balance, and understanding, again, to where we're talking about where the customer from an HCP perspective is in his or her journey with the brand, and really understanding what tactics make sense and where they are, and aligning I'll call them behavioral objectives that you have, whether it's brand awareness. Okay, so if I need to do brand awareness with said targets, here are the different tactics I need to do. Okay, if I'm looking at more sort of a different area of their journey and keeping a patient on therapy, what are the different tactics that I need? And really being very crystal clear about what are those behavioral objectives that you have for your media plan and your media strategy, and making sure that they all coincide and work together, and you're really crystal clear on what you need to accomplish at each phase, and making sure you're not using an awareness tactic to drive adherence, right, or vice versa, right? And I think where that comes into is a really clear understanding of your market, your segmentations, and what is needed, and also having the right partners, having those people that are alongside as your extended brand, those partners that can really help keep it simple, can align to those different metrics, and really kind of make sure we're staying the course and helping definitely individuals make strategic decisions, because at the end of the day, you said we only have so many dollars, and so we have this dollar and we need to make sure it goes to the right target to help achieve our brand strategies, and finding the right partners around the table is really critical for that, and making sure you really understand that and understand I always look at don't get into analysis paralysis, right? Data we're talking about today is so critical, but sometimes you do have to, in order for the plant to bloom, you have to let the seed, be there and plant it and give it water and sun to let it flourish. Sometimes we have a tendency to make a decision if we don't see an immediate impact or the right number, that one measure support, we want to take up the seed and move it to another thing. Like, again, let's stay aligned to what we need to do and really focus in on that. It's an orchestra. It's lots of different things coming together to help support patients and HCPs along their journey for us to achieve our brand objectives. But knowing that, again, it's all a concert. It's all, everything has its own right time and place, and that we can't get so stuck into the weeds where we're changing things too quickly or getting into analysis paralysis. So it's all about what I like to call sort of like the discipline of choice. Like, it's okay to let things go, or it's okay to say no to something if it's not aligning to what you need to do. But this definitely, from a omni-channel media strategy, is definitely something brand leaders are around the world thinking about each and every day to make sure it's working effectively and aligned to the greater brand strategic imperatives.
Chris, I think you might be muted.
Sorry about that. It had to happen one time, right? I think I love your analogy of the discipline of choice. And it's funny because I always look at decisions as, can I walk back in that door that I just went out? Mm-hmm. And if I can't, then that decision needs to be thought about even longer. And a lot of the times, you've got, to your point, media investments or creative decisions that are not quick hits, that you do have to think about that stuff. But there's other choices where you can avoid paralysis and make a decision and do an analysis 2 weeks later and step back and say, okay, well, that didn't work, and let's try this other direction. So I love that analogy of discipline of choice.
Well, that's great. And thank you, Chris and Neal and Kristin here. I do want to get to, just one or two Q&As that have come in. Before that, we do have a poll question that I'll jump to right now. So if you all, I'll give you a minute for those on the line here to answer really, what role does data and analytics play in your overall brand campaign strategy? And as I'm sure we are in this, new normal, and as everybody has Zoom meetings back to back, I'll be cognizant of time as I just give you 1 minute to answer that, and then we'll jump into the results and follow up with a couple of the Q&A. All right, so it does look like I didn't give you that much time, but it does look like most everyone said that they actively use it to both gain insights into segments for your desired audience, which does make a lot of sense. I think as you heard the panel here today, they are sharing a lot of their feedback of what they're seeing, and are able to use those insights to really segment their audience and really utilize it to build out their overall campaigns. All right, and so with that, we'll jump to the Q&A here. We have about a minute left, so I'll get to one of the questions that we have here, which is, do you think the increase in virtual appointments will uncover brand, new data sources that can be leveraged in media campaigns? And what would that look like? So would one of the panelists like to jump in to answer?
I mean, what would it look like? I can jump in. What would it look like? I think that's the whole point of this entire thing is we're not sure what it would look like. I think data comes down to how do we analyze it, and what does that mean for the media campaigns? I do hope it uncovers new data sources. I also hope it pushes some of the industry players to think differently as well. And I'd love to see, like I talked about earlier, the data getting to us quicker. I mean, we know it's available. Let's be honest. Like the data is there. How do we make that quicker so we can make those decisions a little bit faster?
I'll tell you something that popped up from this conversation today that I really need to go back and look at. How does telehealth change the patient journey in a disease? And I really thinking about it, the traditional, maybe it doesn't change anything, but you talk about what is the new data source? I want to know does it change the way diseases are treated? Is it changing what drugs are administered? The choices of therapy. Do we need to look at our value proposition of our products a little differently? So this conversation is actually making me think I should go back and revisit my patient journey and seeing how telehealth, does it impact, does it deviate on a path, and does it create potentially different behaviors that I have to be aware of?
I think that's really key, Neal, for as you think about, launch brands, right? So the thinking about, a new treatment choice, does telehealth impact that? Like, do healthcare professionals, in different therapeutic areas, probably very different, like, do they feel comfortable without seeing that patient, in the office to prescribe a new treatment option? What about different tests that they would need to be able to feel comfortable to be able to do that? Checking blood pressure, all these things. And here I think is where obviously technology and data come into play with apps and trackers and things like that are going to help inform doctors and how they can make treatment decisions. But yeah, in terms of their prescribing and what they're willing to do and not do is definitely critical along that brand journey.
Thank you. And I want to thank our panel, Kristin, Neal, and Chris here. This was an awesome discussion. I hope everybody attending the webinar really enjoyed it and have some takeaways that you can take back to your brand planning and start to implement. With that, we'll end the webinar. I want to thank Marcus Evans for the opportunity here and the organization behind this. And look forward to, hopefully connecting with some of you. And some of those questions we did not get to, we'll be sure to reach back out to you with those answers. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.